Hey gang, so it's been 2 weeks. Numbers dropped. I was planning on having this kind of be a ship special because I didn't expect there to be a lot of changes this time, and then they dropped 319 to the PTU pretty much 2 weeks after dropping 318.2 to the PTU, which was real unexpected. A lot of changes this time, so let's not waste any time. Let's get this. Okay, so my goal here is to kind of rock through this as fast as possible, just because I do want to get to the ship thing. I did kind of have a plan for what I'd be doing today. But first of all, I'm going to start out with a caveat. If you've never seen one of these before, this is where I do my Sprintwatch. I call it that because CIG uses the Agile development system. And what that is they move in 2-week sprints. And so basically a team will work on a deliverable for 2 weeks, see where they're at, sort of see if it's a dead end or see if they need to go other places with it, see if another team needs to come in. If there's another piece of tech that needs to be implemented, they might just put it on ice for a month or a year or whatever's needed, and then they'll dive back into it later. That's not too unusual with this project, much to some people's consternation. But with that in mind, just because something is 100% complete on the progress tracker, which is the main thing I track with this, doesn't necessarily mean that's actually done. Could just mean that's waiting for resources, could mean that's waiting for tech, could mean that they're just kind of putting it on ice because they need that team to be working on something else. So just keep that in mind as we go through these. Basically what I do is what a lot of content creators do. I go through not the monthly report. I go through the Roundup. Then I go through, kind of talk about the changes that are there, then the release view, the changes that are there. And then I go through the progress tracker, which is kind of the focus of what I do. And with the progress tracker, I talk about the major changes that I see, kind of their impacts on the game, that sort of thing. Sort of a long form one, so settle in. I'm going to try to go a little bit faster on the progress tracker than I usually do because we've got some more information. I don't know if it's leaks or just rumors, but about the new ships, I kind of want to talk about that because it's always fun to talk about. So let's go ahead and dive in. So the roadmap roundup, we'll go down. I usually skip this part at the top, so we'll just go right in here. Notable changes for May 3rd, 2023. Progress tracker. The following deliverables have been added to the progress tracker. Ship trespass. The interior of players' ships are now considered trespass zones for those without permission to enter. Permission will be granted via the party system until more complex systems for managing crew and passengers is created. That is cool, and we've been waiting a long time for it. Players trespassing aboard a ship can be attacked by the owner of the ship and any other player of their party without fear of committing a crime. This deliverable has been added to the mission feature team schedule. One way I could see that being abused is if you are in a down state, someone could transport you onto their ship, then murder you with impunity. I don't know how that would benefit them. Hard to tell how you could use that for griefing, because any situation where you would be pulling someone onto your ship to kill them and steal their stuff, you could probably just as easily kill them on their own ship. I guess if you're going to take a new player around, you could do it with impunity. Anyway, new missions, retrieve consignment. A new mission type where players are tasked with locating critical items in consignment lists, then safely extract them. This deliverable has been added to the mission feature team schedule. Mission feature team's gonna have a lot on their schedule for this next little time here. Sounds kind of cool. Pick things up in a shopping list. Release view. The following card. Oh yeah, I guess it is just one thing. The following card has passed its final review for Alpha 319. Therefore, we are updating its card to committed. RSI links, big shocker. It's been more or less done for a while. It easy fit into 319 whenever we get it. Probably be testing it in the PTU before too long here. this is where it kind of threw me. The following cards have been added to the 3.20 column, which is big on the release view. Ship trespass. The interior of player ships are now considered trespass zones, and it basically says the same thing. New missions, retrieve consignment. Again, that's the one that we just read up here. So this is basically just saying that we've added these to the progress tracker, and we've added these to 3.20, which is a pretty big deal. So both of these things, which sound kind of like cool mechanics, are coming in very soon. And of course, Mystical Sea. So we've seen this one on the tracker before. This is a really good sign that they're going back to this well, because they typically don't put anything on the release view now for the last few patches unless they're dead sure they can get it in there, because they got real tired of the whole CIG is lying narrative that everybody would go to whenever they'd take something off of the roadmap. So if the Mystical Sea is on there for 3.20, which they said that was going to be September-ish, I think 3.20 is basically an IAE release. That's interesting. I'll get into that when I go into the deliverables, why the Mystical Sea is more than just one ship dropping in. It's one ship and a whole host of other mechanics improvements and systems that have to be in place to support that ship coming in, which was also one of the similar holdups to the Banu Merchantman coming in. So the whole sea coming in is a sign that some of those roadblocks, CIG thinks they can pull them away. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into the release view and take a look at it for ourselves. So this is the release view. We got 3.19. Now everything is committed. You can actually hop in and see this in the PTU right now. And you can see right up here, it doesn't look like they've updated this, because this says PTU version is 3.18.2, which isn't true. The PU version is 3.18.2. The PTU is 3.19, which is why I can talk about it now since I'm under NDA. My advice on 3.19, which this was real unexpected for a lot of us, but 3.19 is in the, I think it's sort of tier 1 of the PTU, which I think is concierge, but it's going to be opening wider pretty quick. It's a pretty stable patch. I've been impressed by it so far. Things that I would recommend you do, they have Lorville Seascape here, which definitely make your starting location Lorville, or at least make it a point to travel there. And then go to Area 18 and just look at the clouds on Area 18. They look really impressive, and Lorville is mind-blowingly good. It is really neat. They got a bunch of new building types. It looks cool. New player experience. I don't think this is actually in the PTU yet, but by the time it goes wider, it should be, maybe even by the time you're watching this. New salvage missions. If you've got a Vulture or Reclaimer, especially if you've got a Vulture, do these. One thing I will say is make sure you go into your key bindings and bind the, I think it's salvage unlock. It's something like that, but you actually have to physically bind that key. I think F3 is kind of an open key. I don't think there's anything bound to that, but you won't be able to do this attach and detach thing until you bind that key, because otherwise the components are locked on that ship. So you have to unlock those components by going into the ship. I think sitting in the, I don't know if you have to do this part or not. I actually haven't tested this. I've just tested the missions, which are kind of cool. But once you unlock everything, you'll be able to pull the components off. And the salvage ships is valuable. It's not as valuable as the weapons. Like if you salvage an Eclipse, which is usually the tier 0 salvage mission, is to go out and you get a claim on an Eclipse. Those torpedoes are real expensive, so definitely salvage those. Ghost Hollow PvP missions, I don't think that one's in there either, and the RSI links of course is in now. And then gameplay, as there's 3.20, you can see it's tentatively Q3 2023, so this is on me. 3.19 Q2 2023. I was looking at some of the deliverables for 3.19, or not. I guess it wasn't deliverables that they said would be in 3.19, but things that I thought that they could sneak in if 3.19 were a June patch. I think what they're trying to do is get 3.19 out for Invictus and to hell with the other deliverables. So I was thinking that it was going to be past June or like June-esque, like July. But no, they're going to be rolling it out now. So we might get a 319.1 or something like that with those deliverables that I was talking about, like the traversal, which isn't in this. It isn't in 319. So things like EVA, which I really badly wanted, ladder climbing, sliding, swimming, prone has new traversals. All of those things are more or less done. Or would have been done around June. So I would guess after IAE rolls out, they might do a 319.1 or 319.2 where they actually put some of those elements in. If not, man, I hope we get them by 3.20 because it's been a little while coming. But anyway, 3.20, we've got it up there. We kind of know what they're aiming for. So the ship trespass and retrieve consignment and the whole sea, which is a really big deal. So we're already probably about 10 minutes into this. Let's head on over to the progress tracker and let's fly through this. A lot of changes on this, but I'm just going to go quick. I talk about a lot of these items. There's not a lot of new items. Let's just go on over. There's not a lot of new items this time other than the two that they mentioned. But there was a lot of movement. So there's a lot of things that jumped out a few weeks or dropped a few weeks. If you want to hear about those, I'd say click on last week's where I really kind of went through them in detail. When 319 drops, I'll do a deep dive where I go through everything. But for this time, I think I'll just kind of mention what changes happened and what impacts I think those will have, and maybe point out a few that are kind of linked that will signify something else is coming down the pike. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get into this. So I went ahead and spread this out a little bit for you so that you could see a little bit more. The way that I set this up is I said for deliverables, it'll auto start on teams. I move it over to deliverables 1 quarter. And then this line is where we currently are in the timeline here. So you can see we are roughly halfway through Q2. So the end of Q2 is the end of June, which is this week 13 over here. So big things that are happening now, aerodynamic control surfaces. This is one that I was thinking they could sneak into 319 if it was a June release, because I mean, it would have been finishing here and you'd have until here to polish it or drop it into the PTU. Since they're planning on dropping it here, maybe 319.1, maybe 3.20 at this point. But it's almost done. Looks like it's pretty well on its way. It's been at 39 weeks for a long time. So I wouldn't expect it to move much more than that. Opos and Tokiai, which is the medium fighter for the GN. I'd say it's probably about the halfway mark, but one thing I wanted to mention to this one will probably be dropping for IAE, I would guess. But there's no downstream teams in this. So, whatever this date is, which looks like the end of Q3, which would be roughly IA. Actually, yeah, that would be around IE time. Stretch it out a few weeks, especially for an alien ship, and that'll give you a more realistic time. AR map marker system rework. This is a big one. For one of the things that I thought 319 was going to be was on top of traversal was going to be UI improvements. But this one is kind of grown as things go on, which not a big shocker. It is a Squadron 42 asset, so expect it to be prioritized. It's not one of those things that they're just going to put a pin in and come back to in a year. They can't. They're trying to get Squadron 42 out the door. But it looks like it's wrapping. This is another one that I thought could drop into 319, but now it looks like it won't. Maybe 319.1, maybe 3.20. Don't know. So artificial gravity, this one is, and I wanted to point out the Argo SRV does not have any downstream teams. So even though it wrapped like a couple months back, there's no downstream teams in this. So UI hasn't been in there. Sound hasn't been in there. VFX hasn't been in there. So you'll see this bar once they're ready to drop the SRV in. Maybe 3.20 would make sense since they're thinking of putting the whole C in there. Argo SRV would make a lot of sense because it could move the bigger boxes around and put them on the whole sea. You'll see this bar jump way out. And that's another thing I like to do. So you can see that I can tell there's no downstream teams on here. Typically, this is the default view, and the only thing you can see is that there's 2 teams working on it. It's a blue bar and it's done. If you open it up, you can see it's the EU vehicle content team and the US vehicle content team. There's no UI, VFX, or audio on here. So you can tell that even though the ship is done, it's still got a lot of time to go. So it'll jump out. They're probably going to jump back into it after Invictus, because they've got a couple ship sales they're going to try to kick out the door for Invictus. I would guess that those downstream teams are working on those ships. Then they're going to come back over to the SRV, and then it'll kick out again. So I'll have this gap in between the teams working. Anyway, artificial gravity. This one dropped by 6 weeks, which is unusual. So it was out here, now it's down here. Whether that'll stick or not, who knows? Good sign for the engineering gameplay. Will we get it this year? Maybe the December patch. It's starting to look like engineering might be next year, though, just based on how some of those have grown. Asteroid facilities, this is the way things went this week. Added 11 weeks, but again, there's another one that was way out there. This is probably going to be a pyro asset anyway, so don't expect that, or do expect that one to kind of keep growing. There's no downstream teams in here, and I would expect there to be for asteroid facilities. But yeah, that one grew. Cave archetypes just wrapped, and you can sort of see here's audio and VFX. So those are the downstream teams there, and that's what it looks like in VFX just ended. Cave archetypes is one of those that I kind of like to point out. It ran 109 weeks, but they're going to keep rolling out different types of cave archetypes. So they did sand was in 318. I think they're going to do rock. They mentioned crystal at some point, or maybe I dreamed that. I don't know. Probably going to do underwater caves, snow and ice caves, that kind of thing. So they're going to keep working and working and working on this. So just expect this one, even though it's done. It's the kind of thing that they'll deliver it to us in, think of it as modules. So they'll give us the sand cave. This will keep going and going and going. And then they'll give us the underwater cave or whatever. But this one will just keep going. Squadron 42, just plugging right along. I think this is roughly just as far as they have it planned out, is like, when would this be? Like mid-July. But I say this every time with any Squadron 42 asset, until they actually announce the game is going gold, actually releasing for sale. And even then, just expect these to keep going and going and going and keep polishing. So even though this is wrapped here and this is wrapped here, there's no reason not to expect them to just keep going over it and over it and over and over and trying to hammer it out. So one of the things I thought was kind of a low-hanging fruit that they could sneak onto us was a new character creator. This is specifically a Squadron 42 asset, both character creator and character work. They're mildly related to each other, but the character creator in particular, I was kind of hoping that we would get on the back end in the PU, just to test it out for Squadron 42, if nothing else. But no sign of it yet. Maybe 3.20, maybe 3.19.1, maybe never. We don't know. Character work, sort of in the same vein. We'll see the knock-on benefits with character work in the PU, but when is another question. Crusader Spirit, just want to point this one out. Again, kind of wrapping near the end of the quarter. Be a pretty easy ad for IAE. About the only thing with the Spirit that I could see there being a delay on would be the E1, which is the people mover, the passenger liner. Just because they don't have anything that has a game loop. So they have to have working AI that can move onto your ship and sit down and not be like standing on the chairs or whatever. They've got to have like a reputation system along with that. So I could see the E1, like them dropping the C1 and the A1 to us, sort of the same way that they did it with the Hercules, where they dropped the C1 and the M2, and then they dropped the A2 with its big ass bombs the next patch. I could see them kind of doing the same thing with the Crusader, except dropping the E1 a little bit later. Again, note there's no downstream teams here. So even though it wraps here, expect it. Spirit isn't a really big ship, so maybe a month, 2 months, and it'll be done. So by IA, we should have at least one version of the Crusader Spirit in our hands. Cutting is one of those things that is 100% necessary. There are 3 things that have to happen for the next tier of salvaging, which is vehicle munching. Cutting is one of them. The other one is damage and breakability, which is, I think it's down a little bit further. It's under something else like vehicles, damage and breakability. If I see it, I'll point it out. But you have to have that, cutting, and salvage vehicle munching, which I think that one's done, but cutting is, and the damage and breakability are the 2 things that are kind of holding up the next tier of salvage. Thankfully, they were able to roll out that the tractor beaming off components and weapons and stuff like that. They're able to do that. So we got another tier of salvage that we weren't expecting instead of the one that we were hoping that we get, like vehicle munching. So win-win in a sense. Derelict spaceships, points of interest. I just like to point this one out every time. This is another one of those, like the cave archetypes, where we'll get modules. They're going to do derelict spaceships of every single ship in the game. So they'll just roll out. They rolled out the 600i and the Mercury Star Runner last patch. They'll probably, every couple patches or so, they'll probably dump another couple derelict ships in there. Any properties plugin, this is one that actually wrapped last time, but they added, let's see, 14 weeks to it. Flak ammunition, not much to say. The weapon feature team has started work on it, which this was something that we were waiting on. So we could have this one pretty soon. One thing that's kind of surprising about this is that it's just a PU asset. I would assume flak ammunition, especially with swarms of Vandal ships attacking your ships in Squadron 42, that this would also be a Squadron 42 asset. Yeah, I would guess that's probably going to be both. So FPS devices just dropped. Don't be too surprised that one keeps growing. They're always going to have more FPS devices that they want to throw in there. Hacking tier 0, I thought that just because this one, again, June was over here, I thought that they might be able to sneak hacking into us. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case because, I mean, obviously this is 3.19, so maybe 3.20. So life support is another one of those. There was a time back in the beginning of the year when I was thinking that 3.19, actually, even late last year, I thought 3.19 might be, when they were saying 3.19 was going to be a December patch, and then it became obvious that wasn't going to be the case. I thought 3.19 might be an engineering patch. Life support would be a key part of that, and it's not coming to us until Q3, according to this. So just given that length of time, I would expect this at the earliest to be a December patch, if not next year. It did lose 6 weeks, though. So it used to be 128 weeks. Now it's 122. So this is one that's kind of sad. Map and radar system rework. When I was saying that I thought that 3.19 would be a UI improvement, one of the main ones that I thought would be improved would be the new map, because the star map sucks. The star map sucks almost as much as EVA sucks, maybe more. But this one kicked out, let's see, 8 weeks. So it looked like it was about to wrap. They kicked it out another 2 months. I thought that this one would make it into 3.19 because it was ending around, let's see, around here. So there would have been time to test it for the June release of 3.19. But since they're apparently going to be dropping 3.19 here-ish, it's not going to make it in. So maybe 3.20. Cross your fingers. And by the same token, the mobiGlas rework, this one has not added any time, but you can sort of see it's in the same situation. I was thinking maybe if 319 dropped here at the end of June and it was there for a couple weeks, like in the PTU for a couple weeks, then there was a chance they could sneak this in. It doesn't look like it's going to happen, obviously. Mop and Bucket is wrapping up pretty soon. This one people make fun of, but it is enabling support for AI janitors to use multiple tools in either hand. That is not just Mop and Bucket, and that's not just janitors. AI being able to use stuff in either hand is kind of cool, and it means they'll be able to use two-handed things or things in either hand is kind of neat. Speaking of, I have noticed that the NPCs and the bunkers are able to switch hands from like shooting around corners with their right hand to shooting around corners with their left hand. Why can't we do that? I said a long time ago that you should be able to push middle mouse button or some keybind and let you switch hands on your guns, because otherwise when you're shooting around a left-hand corner, you're like leaning way out and exposing your whole body. I just think that's something they could fix. Anyway, the new interdiction scenarios, this one added 11 weeks. Again, this is another one that'll be modules that'll roll out to us, that just because this one is ending out here doesn't mean we won't be getting new interdiction scenarios in 319 and 320, whatever. They're just adding them as they go. Here's the new one that they're talking about, new missions package extraction. I think this is the, oh no, it actually says something different here. A new multiplayer mission where players will work together to recover stolen prototype ship components. I think I read this last time. Crusader Security tasks players with extracting these highly classified components from Ninetales transport ships before they can escape off-world. What would be cool, and I hope one of the things they're doing with this extra time, is that you can take that mission, you can stop the Ninetales, and then you could put those components in your ship, and you'd get like a crime stat 5 or whatever from Crusader, but your ship would be smoking for a little while. Retrieve consignment. This is the newest one that they added for 320. Critical items in consignment list, and then safely extract them. And kind of get a sense for where they're thinking they'll release 3.20 here. So 3.20 is definitely looking like an IAE patch. And here's the salvage contract. So this is one that I talked about briefly last time, was it dropped off of this list. I said it's not actually dropping off since we're getting it in 319. But you can sort of see this was one of those that I was thinking, this was kind of the sign they're saying this was a 319 asset. It's in the PTU right now. You can actually run these, but you can see this is where we are. This is where it ends. So they just keep adding more contracts. So that's what that is. So the actual sprint to get the thing up and running was about 5 weeks or so, which is pretty cool. And then they're just going to be adding more assets and polish to it out here. But it's kind of cool they can spin up a whole mission. I'd call it a mission. Spin up a mission that fast. X1. So this is Paul Shelley Astropub, one that he really wants to see. And so what's happening with this one, I always like to kind of use this one as a warning, is, so if you look at it and it's shut, it's just this 87-week long sprint to make a space bike, and not a big space bike either. This thing is probably going to be roughly the size of a Nox. But what really happened was the EU vehicle content team worked on it here, and the US content team is due to work on it way out here. And one thing I like to say is that when there's a gap that big, that's aspirational. Like, that team might start working on it there, but they're just sort of saying, let us get through the stuff that's on our to-do list. We could probably work on it after July. And that's what this is saying, is, okay, penciling this in after July. My theory for a while now has been that they're actually waiting on the 600i, freeing up the people that are going to be doing that rework. Because it looked like it was pretty far along last time we saw it, and then they just kind of put a pin in it for whatever reason. Working on Squadron 42 or other assets would be my guess. Just we have a working 600i, it just, the interior kind of sucks. But I would think that they were trying to release those two things at the same time. And they still have enough time to kind of work the rework in here. It does look like this would probably be an IAE asset. And Paul Shelley actually has some pull with CIG since he's been around forever. He actually has friends in the company that if he says it enough, CIG might be like, yeah, you know, we're not going to get to the 600i this year. Let's just get the X1 out the door and just get a win. The 400i actually has a built-in hanger specifically for that bike, and it's been in concept, I think, since 2018, I think. But Origin X1, space bike, they're not even going to start work on it for a while. No downstream teams. Little bike, though, so shouldn't take them too long to bang that part out, I wouldn't think. And when we saw the last concept of this 4 years ago, it looked pretty far along. Outpost, Independent, and Outlaw, this one added 11 weeks. If they're going to add these to Stanton, like the Outback of Hurston or Daymar or something like that, I could see this one rolling in pretty soon, like dropping a module on us, but you can sort of see it's end of Q3. Originally, this one was a Pyro asset, but that was back when they were thinking of dropping Pyro at the end of 2022, which obviously didn't happen, or 2020. So why not just keep polishing it? Persistent Habs. I don't think I had anything on this one. It's just wrapping pretty soon, which is cool. We'll have our own little apartments in the verse. Physical damage and breakability. That's what it was. So this is the other item that you need before the next tier of salvage can come in, which is vehicle munching. This just breaks up the ships combined with cutting. You can break up the ships on sort of set nodes, or maybe even just cut them at random, kind of like you could with Hard Space Shipbreaker. And then you have vehicle munching, which will pull those pieces in, munch them, and create more assets for you to sell. Player HUD. This is just another one that, again, if they're dropping 319 in June, I was like, they might be able to sneak it into 319. Not anymore. 319 is dropping here. Maybe 3.20. I know that I've been saying that for the last few patches of maybe we'll get this in this patch. Kind of the way development goes. We'll get it when we get it. Keep your fingers crossed for 3.20. It would be nice to have new AI or UI in the very near future. That one isn't as critical as the map, but it would be nice. So Rastar came back and added a few weeks. They had wrapped it. This is the tool that they use to make the outposts, like towns and villages and stuff like that. Eventually it will be what we use with the Pioneer to build our own outposts. This is the system that they do for it. Wouldn't be shocked if this one keeps stretching out. They're going to have the UI team go in and tackle it when they give it to us anyway. So this one will be wrapped for a long time, and then all of a sudden it'll jump out to 500 weeks or whatever as they work on the player-facing UI for it. Refinery ships. So I just want to talk about refinery ships because we do have the Expanse out there, and it is kind of the last remaining. I'd say there's two missing links in mining right now. There is mining assets that, maybe three. There's mining assets that they briefly mentioned they might look at voxel mining, so that one's a maybe. Then there's mining assets that would be things that the large RSI miner, which I think is one of the concepts we're getting in the next few months here. That's one that assets that are large enough for that and the Orion to mine, and refining is the last step in that. And the Expanse would probably be the first one that they'd roll out that would do that, refining. But this has got to finish first. But is this an indicator that we might be getting the Expanse soon? Maybe. I don't think the Expanse is one they would sneak to us through the unannounced ships, though. But the Expanse isn't an overly large ship. I think probably 50-week sprint, but the UI for doing the refinery has to come first. So I would not be shocked if the Expanse comes onto the roadmap near the end of the year and flows into next year, and we get sometime next year. Would make a lot of sense to get that with Pyro. RSI links moved to committed. You can see that it's down here. Audio team is the last people working on it. VFX has already had their crack. GFX hasn't, but it's a ground vehicle, so you wouldn't really expect that. Yeah, looking real solid. I'm sort of shocked it's not in the PTU right now. RSI Polaris, I want to mention this because I keep seeing content creators, like ones who really should know better, talking about the Polaris and saying it's going to drop in September or whatever. It's a 24-week sprint. First of all, notice that only the EU vehicle content team is working on it, so there's no downstream teams on it. So we're not getting it on this date. Secondly, the ship is enormous. They are not rolling it out in, 6 months? This thing's going to be 90 weeks to 110 weeks. Maybe not that long because RSI is a well understood style guide. And while it's a huge ship, it doesn't have any unique aspects to it, like game loops that they'd have to develop in concert with it. So it could move a little bit faster, but a little bit faster is not 24 weeks. That's space bike territory. They are not dropping the RSI Polaris here. Maybe this time next year if they really kick ass and start moving on it, but I would expect that one to be the big ticket item for IAE. So like November of next year. Ship Trespass is the new one. We pretty much already talked about that. We're good with that one. Just people coming onto your ship will be labeled as trespassers if you haven't indicated that they're part of your party, which eventually that'll be much more complex of this person is a passenger, but they can't actually interact with any of the systems. If they wanted to interact with the systems, they'd have to use the hacking game loop to get there. But that's a ways off, I think. This is just kind of a low-hanging gimme to just give people some option for dealing with people breaking onto their ships without killing a trespasser and then getting a crime stat for murder and then going to prison, all while trying to defend their ships from boarders. So vehicle tractor beams, I skipped over the unannounced vehicles because that was originally going to be the focus of this talk because I didn't see them having a whole bunch of changes. So oops. Anyway, vehicle tractor beams, you're not getting the SRV until vehicle tractor beams are done. So look for the SRV in 3.20, I would guess, but they're not going to put it on there until this is pretty much down here, until there's like a week left of vehicle tractor beams and they're sure they're done with it. Then they'll polish off the SRV, which I don't think has any downstream teams on it, and roll it out to us. And that's it for that. So what I want to talk about is we have gotten a little bit more information on, I think it's leaks. And we know that there are at least 3 to 4 ships that they've mentioned out there. They've mentioned the Tumbrel Storm, which Tumbrel makes ground vehicles. They've mentioned the Misk Fury. That was dropped. That's the only one that's officially confirmed because a dev name dropped it on Star Citizen Live. So we know the Misk Fury exists out there. The Misk Mirai exists out there. And so that one, if you have access to Jump Point, this is the Mirai right here. So interestingly, this doesn't say MISC on it. I'm wondering if it says, there's nothing on here that says MISC, which maybe it's a new company. So it could be that the Mirai and the Fury are two different things. It could also be that the MISC Fury had one name and they changed it to another. CIG has done that in the past. But the final ship is the Gatak Sulian, which people are thinking it's going to be a small ship. From what I have seen, it is not going to be a small ship. So let's get into that. So this guy right here, this 78-week vehicle here, is what I think is the Gatak Sulian. The sprint, the concept sprint, so making the JPEG for this ship, was around 66 weeks. For scale, the Gatak Railin to make its JPEG was 7 weeks. So this thing is not small. For another size comparison, the Odyssey had a 55-week sprint. So it would make sense that something that is around that size, so think Carrick sized, it could be a little bit smaller but very complex, so it has a lot of moving parts and stuff like that. Another thing to keep in mind is that the vehicle concept team was working concurrently with the vehicle content team. So they're actually building this ship, and they have been since around the start of the year, working concurrently. So these guys are probably working on the gray box around here with the vehicle concept team. So that's the first time I've seen that. But even if the actual JPEGs were done back here, that's still a very large ship. You're probably looking at like a 40 to 50 week sprint just to make the art before the vehicle content team starts working on it. That is a big ship. So I would guess the Sulian is going to be like a whole sea competitor with the Xi'an. I would assume this is going to be a big ship, and we will see a concept sail for Alien Week in June. I would guess, even though this is out to here, keep in mind that that's only as far as it's planned. They might be able to roll it out that fast, but I would be surprised. So again, kind of like the Polaris, this is just sort of what they have planned with those sprints. Like, we're going to be working on it for a while, so this is working on it for a while. Like, it's probably going to go into next year, just if this ship is as big as I think it is. So moving on from that, the MISC Fury, the dev that dropped the bomb that existed was a VFX guy, and the only one of these unannounced ships that has any VFX work done on it is this 41-week sprint. To give you some scale for 41 weeks, so the Anvil Pisces was a 37-week sprint from start to finish, so that is a tiny starter. The Anvil Centurion, which is a ground vehicle, was 24 weeks. And I'll come back to this when we talk about the Tumbril Storm. Let's look at a couple others. So we've got the Anvil Legionnaire was 26 weeks. The Centokii is 37. Again, remember that the downstream teams aren't involved. So with this, with 41 weeks, you're looking at something that's roughly the same size and complexity as the Centokii. And I've been called on this before where people are like, you can't tell the size of the ship by the sprints. But you can actually tell a lot from how long these sprints are. There is some variation. Variants aren't as complex as creating new ships with new game loops or undefined mechanics. Will take a little bit longer, even though they might be a smaller ship. So if you had something that was doing, if you had, say, a hacking ship that grabbed onto other ship with these big claws and stuff like that, that would take a lot longer than, say, a ship that just carries cargo or is built on an existing ship. So anything from the Atlas line, which is the Spartan, the Centurion, the Ballista, and the, I feel like I'm forgetting one. Might be forgetting one. But if they were to build another one on that, it goes kind of quick. So 41 weeks. You're looking at something roughly medium fighter sized. Since it's MISC, or maybe Mirai might be a new company. If it's a new company, you could get something that's actually a fighter. If it was MISC, I'd be very surprised, just because MISC is an industrial company. So all of their combat ships, like the Freelancer Miss, the Tana, the Razor LX, they're all variants of industrial or racer ships. So 41 weeks, I would expect this to be medium fighter sized or something that's complex, which with MISC would have Xi'an elements to it. Maybe a racer. The problem with MISC is that their line is pretty filled up. So I could see this being like a grav car. So something roughly the size of a Cyclone, but grav would, something like that would make sense. We don't have that in the game right now, so it'd be kind of cool. But that's kind of, this one is definitely, if the MISC Fury is not the Mirai, this is the MISC Fury. The MISC Fury is the Mirai. This is it too, because it's the only one with VFX on it. Either way, we should be finding out in a couple weeks when Invictus drops. We'll see what this is. Since it's dropping with Invictus, really strong chance it's a fighter of some kind, and probably a medium fighter, which would compete with the Tana, which doesn't make sense. Again, the fact that it's MISC kind of screws with me a little bit. We have another concept right here. So the Tumbril Storm is a little bit more complicated. If I had to guess, Tumbril makes let's see, the Cyclone and the Tonk. I think that's all we've seen so far. I don't remember if they actually make the Ranger. They might make the Ranger, which is an actual motorcycle. But either way, I would think the Storm, if I had to guess, something that either launches a bunch of missiles, or it could be like a troop transport, because outside of the Spartan, we don't have something that's roughly Ursa sized, or maybe even slightly larger than Ursa. I could even see something the size of a Tonk that has treads that's an APC that, you know, carries like 10 to 12 people in it. Could be something like that. But anyway, we've got a few ships in here, or unannounced vehicles here. They're good candidates. This one is actually being built out, 29-week sprint, but we're not getting this one until probably IAE. 29 weeks to actually build the thing. This is something small. 29 weeks is less time that it took to make the Pisces the first time. With the downstream teams in there, you're looking at something small. So 29 weeks, something small. 15 weeks is something medium to small size. So this one would probably be a good bet for the Spartan. 28 weeks, if the Spartan is larger, could fit here. But I think this one is more likely to be, so this one's 28 weeks. I wouldn't be surprised if this is our large minor, the one that fits in between the Orion and the Mole. I think that's what this one would be. So this one is probably your Tumbril Storm right there, would be my guess. And 15 weeks would mean that's a medium vehicle. If it's Tumbril, it's definitely a ground vehicle. That's all I got, guys. So let me know what you think. Again, we've got 4 names and possibly 3 ships. Possibly 5 ships if we've actually got the large minor in the mix, because we've got more ships in concept now than we actually have names for. So we know there's the Tumbril Storm, the MISC Fury, the Mirai, which is this guy, and the Sulian. So we've got 4 names floating out there, and we've got 5 things on the progress tracker. Pretty sure big one is the Sulian. I know this is the MISC Fury. The MISC Fury and the Mirai are the same thing. That takes care of that one. Tumbril Storm, I'm thinking, is probably the small one here. We'll see. And the last thing I'll touch on is this is the weekly report, Art Ships. Another new ship passed the white box stage. This is nearing completion and will move to the next production stage once an upcoming review is completed. So that is likely the Sulian, would be my guess. It could be either the Sulian or this one right here, the 29-week sprint. Component bay pass on the Mist Freelancer, which the Mist Freelancer just needs a rework at this point, or at least a refresh. Let's see. In the US, gray box on an upcoming vehicle was completed. We have redesigned the dashboard and cockpit to allow for better visibility while driving in first-person view. So that's your Tumbril Storm. We also did a short pass on optimization, as we found that we may have gone a bit overboard on detail and need to pull it back a bit, especially in areas rarely seen by players. So that's probably the underside. So I think the idea of having it be a hover car or something like that would make sense, because you're not going to be seeing underneath it too often. And that does... Is it just me, or does that kind of look like one of the spider miners from Ghost in the Shell? But anyway, or one of the spider mechs or whatever you want to call them from Ghost in the Shell. Looks like that to me. But there we go. Santoki Eye progressed, with several areas being redesigned and fleshed out, including the rail system, glass scampi. It's kind of cool. Okay, that's all I got for this one. Let me know what you think down below. I read every comment, which isn't hard since there's usually only like 2 or 3 of them. That is within my level of reading comprehension. So thanks for sticking this one out, and catch me next time.